Okay, so today we're going to talk about innovation and new product development. And I'm going to break this talk down into two parts. In the first part, we're going to talk about first what innovation is from a definitional perspective, and then where innovation actually happens. And then after talking about this, in the second part, I'll talk a little bit about the more logistical and more practical aspects of innovation, which is how do you actually get the innovation done from a process perspective. Okay, so let's start by talking about what innovation is. Innovation is not about new things, it's about creating new value. So if you've been following the conversations that we've been having so far, you will realize that marketing is about value delivery, right? So new value is what innovation does. So in a way, you should be able to see that there is a close relationship between marketing and innovation, right? If we define innovation as new value, then marketing probably should be involved in the process because marketing is about value creation and development, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to try to see in the next few slides where can a company create new value. So to try to understand what innovation is better, what we're going to do is we're going to see where innovation actually happens within the firm. Okay, and if you buy the argument that innovation is about new value creation, not necessarily new things, then in that situation, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the entire business as an opportunity to create innovation, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through this framework that I created with a couple other people, where we basically partition the entire business system into 12 different vectors or 12 different areas. And arguably innovation can happen in any of these 12, right? So let me walk you through all of them. Okay. The first one is offerings, and this is the most obvious one, right? Most people, when they think of innovation, they think about new things, right? So offerings could be either a new product, a new service, or maybe a combination of this, okay? So that's a new offering, right? No surprise. So you can create new value there by coming up with new things. Okay. What about a platform? A platform is some sort of a strategic control point that enables you to do things that otherwise you will not be able to. Let me give you an example. Disney movies is a great example, right? Why? Because when you think about Disney movies, yeah, you think about box office, maybe you think about sales of rental / home movies, whether it's in DVD form or downloaded, right? Or streamed. But at the end of the day, Disney movies also serve as a platform so that Disney can also provide things like theme parks, right? Which use these animated movies as stepping stone to create a different experience. And a whole host of merchandise that they have created and also rights to IP that is actually licensed to other companies, right? So this enables Disney to capture a large amount of value by using these animated movies as control points. Okay. Then you have solutions. Solutions are essentially looking at an end-to-end problem from a customer and try to provide a collection of products and services that enable you to fulfill that problem, right? Or to solve that problem. Who does a good job at this? Many companies do. Good example of this will be UPS Logistics. So I'm not talking about UPS in the sense that, you know, they deliver packages. They do have a business-to-business branch of their business where what they enable them, what they sell is they sell services for consulting about how other firms should set up their logistic services, systems, right? So if you're, for example, creating a new plant, a new production plant for a company, right? You can go to UPS Logistics Services and they will help you, tell you where the plant should be located based on, you know, where your warehouses are and where maybe the distributors are for that particular product that you're going to be selling. But also they can help you with the setup of all the logistical aspects that go underneath, like return of products, etc., etc. right? So what they are doing is they are not selling you their original service, they are selling you their know-how so that you can set up systems that will be useful for your business. And this is usually a turnkey offering, which means that they take you from the beginning of the process all the way to the end, and because of that, it's essentially considered a solution. Okay, good. Who else? Where else can we actually create innovation? Around customers, right? This is an obvious one if you're into marketing, which is either finding needs that have not been addressed properly, or maybe segments of customers that are underserved. That's a good example of that is the Home Depot, right? The whole company was built around the insight that there was this segment of do-it-yourselfers that were underserved in the marketplace. So if we're going to do a better job by providing products and services to this segment, maybe we can create a store that looks different, works differently, where people maybe are going to be able to do their own projects even if they are not experts. And maybe because of that, we're going to provide extra services. We're going to have clinics where we teach them, the customers, how to actually do things. So you can go any weekend to the Home Depot and now Lowe's too. And you will find that they actually have things like how to put on tile, right? Or how to install, I don't know, wood flooring, right? Something that maybe not everybody will just feel comfortable doing, but if you have a little bit of help, a lot of people might actually jump into it, and they leverage this, right? Next, experiences. Experiences is essentially the next step after solutions, where what you're trying to do is you're trying to make sure that the customer is satisfied and they can actually have a complete solution for the problems. A good example of this will be Virgin Atlantic, right? So what they do, instead of just like many other airlines, assume that their job starts at the airport and ends at the airport. They realize that if you're paying, I don't know, $3,000 or $5,000 to fly to Europe in a business class ticket, you really don't care about getting to the airport, you care about getting to your meeting place or your hotel, right? So what they will do is they basically offer pickup from home. So they will send a car or a limo to your actual home or office, whatever you're starting your trip from. And then they will take you to the airport. That this enables them, for example, to coordinate if there are any issues, for example, delays, etc., with their own crew, right? And then after that, not only they take you to the airport, but once that you get to the destination, they will actually provide for you either a car or a rental car so that you can actually make it to wherever your meeting is going to be taking place in your destination. Okay, so it's a much more holistic approach, and you're looking at the overall experience, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter that the flight was on time if there is, for example, a strike in London, which is the airport where you are landing at, and you cannot actually make it to your destination point, which is, let's say, firm X, where you're having an important sales meeting. You will not be happy with the flight, even though the flight was on time, right? So it's looking at this much more holistically that makes experiences very relevant, right? And you can create lots of value here. Notice one thing: the moment that you move from products to experiences, because experience is a collection of products and services, right? Or it can be, at least. And this gives you a lot more leeway to come up with new things, right? Because what you're doing is you're customizing something that is uniquely valuable for the customer, right? So it gives you a lot more degrees of freedom to come up with new things. Okay. Value capture, essentially how you get paid, right? How do you capture some of that value that you are actually creating or helping create with your customers and partners? Okay, and you can see this in many ways, but a typical thing that used to be somewhat surprising 10 years ago, maybe it's a little bit less now, is this idea of free products, right? Like free video games. So you can go in Android, for example, to the Play Store, right? And when you get there, one thing that you will see is that there is a whole host of video games that are free. Nothing is free, right? But this idea of free products where you're getting paid in other ways. You're getting paid because maybe you're selling some of the data from the people that are actually watching your games, playing your games. Or in the case of video games, it might be that they have ads, for example, right? So this was a model that was used in TV for many years, but now has expanded to many other products. And video games is just one of them. So thinking about creative ways in which you get paid, and not necessarily monetarily directly from your customers, and it's a way of also creating new innovation, right? In this case, in the area of value capture. Let me go through the other ways in which a company can innovate. Processes. These are internal activities that enable the firm to get things done. For example, operations, right? So any way in which you can create new value there, it's also innovation, right? So for example, typical example of this will be the just-in-time system introduced by Toyota in the 70s and 80s, which is the idea of keeping really low inventory in your production systems. And that enables you, among other things, to keep a really lean organization where your suppliers are gonna submit or send the products that you need at the time that you need them, and that is going to enable you to, because you are keeping a low inventory, have a lot less money invested into the business, or be able to allocate that money into other things other than just holding a bunch of products that are just sitting on the shelf waiting to be used in your production system. Okay. Organization. The way the company is structured can also be a source of innovation. Typical example of this will be this idea of outsourcing that has been very popular over the last 10 years or so, where you take some of your operations and you basically put them outside of the firm because you think that they are going to be provided either cheaper or at a higher level of quality if they are done by another firm. So for example, customer service is outsourced a lot to other countries and companies that are located in other countries like India, for example, in the case of the US, because they have a large population of English-speaking workers in India. This has its potential drawbacks if it's not done properly, but if done properly, it can give you actually an edge over the competition, right, by creating new value. In this case, maybe offering a service at a lower price. Right? Then you have supply chain, the idea of how you get your products to the market. And some companies do a fantastic job when it comes down to this. I talk a little bit about this, I think, in the article. Actually, I don't know if that got into the article in the end. But there is a company in Mexico called Cemex. And what they do is the traditional model is you send these large trucks that have their concrete basically in the back, and it keeps spinning to make sure that it's mixed properly, and maybe to slow down a little bit the curing process so that it can get to the site where it's going to be used in the best conditions possible. The old model of this was you schedule a delivery, and the delivery makes it there whether you are ready or not at the time, at the time that you have scheduled the delivery for your concrete. Now, in reality, if you've worked in construction, you know that there are also reasons why things get delayed, right? So what Cemex enables you to do is, because they have their whole fleet of trucks with GPS tracking, and they have a state-of-the-art logistics distribution system that enables them to reroute trucks last minute. They have algorithms that enable them to compute, what will be the optimal routing of different trucks if they are, for example, there are cancellations last minute. It gives them a lot more flexibility in providing a service that it's more useful for the customer because the concrete arrives there when you're ready. Like if you have a delay, you can call them, so long as it's within a few hours of your delivery, and they can just stop it and just give you the delivery at a later time. So it gives you flexibility, and also it helps them by not having as many situations where the concrete just basically cures in the truck because the construction site cannot use it, and then you literally need to jackhammer the concrete from the truck, right? So in a situation like this, what you're doing is not only you're providing flexibility, which is useful for your customer, but you also are minimizing or at least limiting quite a bit the amount of situations where you actually are going to have to get rid of the product because the product gets wasted, right? So it's a win-win-win. Okay, good. Presence is basically where you are relative to your customers, right? So it's coming up with new ways in which the customer can have access to your product. There are many examples of this, but one thing that I find funny is, for example, having Starbucks inside of Target, right? Which is something that now seems trivial, but 10 years ago it would have been raising some eyebrows, right? Because it seems a little bit excessive, at least to me. But yeah, the idea of getting the product close to where your customer is, okay, or in different ways, getting the product to the customer, maybe online versus offline, etc., etc. Right? Good. Networking is the idea of making products smart by connecting them to a network, right? So, for example, Otis, which is a company that provides movement solutions, elevators, people moving devices like what you have in airports, for example, moving walkways, etc., etc. So a lot of the problems that they have with these products is that they tend to be mission critical, right? So the companies that are using their elevators, they really need those elevators. Like, for example, if you're talking about a high rise, right? If the elevator stops working, it creates a whole host of disruptions, right? So what this enables them to do by hooking up the elevator to a modem and basically having data sent to a central location where they can monitor the condition of the elevator is by using that data and some predictive modeling, basically some math, you can predict when the failures are going to happen and actually do maintenance ahead of time, preventive maintenance, to minimize the amount of time that the products actually end up failing, okay? And also, if it does happen, a failure, you can get notified right away. You don't need the company to call you, you just can see it, and you can just deploy one of your technicians as quickly as possible, right? So this idea of networking to enhance or make the product smarter, right? Elevators used to be dumb products. Now you hook them up to a modem and suddenly they become smart. Good. And then the last one is a brand, which if you're a market is one of your key assets, right? But it's the idea of leveraging your brands above and beyond what is typical in the industry by maybe entering into new industries with the permission of that brand, right? With whatever brand associations you already have. Good. Now here you have a couple of examples of profiles that we created based on data for firms that you probably know. Here you have Starbucks. So what this is looking at is looking at how innovative the company is based on these 12 dimensions. And as I hope you can see here, Starbucks is a pretty successful company. You cannot be innovative in all areas. Okay, so what I'm showing you, I'm going to show you a couple of profiles, is that companies need to make a bet on where they're going to use their resources. By resources, I mean time and people for the most part, right? So you're going to have to focus your innovation efforts into a few things, let's say 2 or 3 things they're going to try to do very well in terms of innovation. Where are you going to try to come up with new things? Is it going to be around customers, right? Is it going to be around branding, right? Or is it going to be around other aspects, right? So you can see here, Starbucks, leveraging the brand heavily. You can find Starbucks in other areas other than company products. For example, if you go to a supermarket, you might be able to find some Starbucks cold drinks. And these are not actually made by Starbucks at all. And they don't have the manufacturing and logistics to actually do that. But what they do is they leverage their brand heavily to be able to do that. Right? Presence is where they are located. I've already talked about Target, right? and they are pretty much everywhere. In fact, they're all CEO. His motto was that you should never have to wait when you get to Starbucks. Right? So he was trying to abolish all lines, and one way to do this is being present pretty much everywhere. So if you go to large cities like Chicago, you will have a Starbucks maybe every other block, right? If you're downtown, and so presence. Good. What else? Here you have Walmart, another company that you know very well, right? And you can see that they are particularly innovative when it comes down to their supply chain. They do a phenomenal job at getting basically organizing the whole supply chain. They embed companies into their supply chain. For example, large companies like Procter & Gamble. And if you work for Procter & Gamble, if you're a manager, there's a good chance that you will spend some time in Arkansas, which is where Walmart is headquartered. And the reason why you will is because you will be embedded within Walmart. So you will work within Walmart so that you can coordinate efforts of, for example, inventory levels, ordering, etc. So Walmart does a great job with their supply chain, right? So you can see here, actually, this kind of looks like a dagger with the blade as supply chain. Anyway, I can tell you some stories about that, but I don't think we need to. Now, we've talked about what innovation is and where innovation actually happened. Now, let me talk to you also about innovation in a more strategic sense. Okay. Now, the basic concept here is going to be the following, and then I'm going to elaborate on it. But the idea is simple. You do not want to be into industries that are full of other competitors. The reason why is because it's really hard to outsmart and outspend and out everything a large number of companies. Okay, you are better off being the only competitor. What does this mean? This means that you want to create a monopoly for yourself. So competing in overcrowded industry is a bad idea. The reason why it's a bad idea, if you know economics 101, is because as the number of companies that enter in the industry goes up, the price that you're going to have to be charging for your products is going to come down. Your margins are going to get thinner and thinner. And because your margins are thin, your profits are going to become smaller. And because your profits are becoming smaller, there is a chance that you start having losses. And there's also a chance that you'll go out of business, right? So the idea is to create your own new industries, your own new blue oceans or blue spaces. Now, what is this idea of blue ocean versus red ocean? Blue ocean is what you see once that you go far away from the beaches, right? Typical blue ocean, right? It's all open. There is nobody there, right? If you are in a ship in the middle of the ocean outside, you will not see another ship for days unless you are either close to shore or maybe in a few of the locations where a lot of ships will travel, like the Panama Canal, for example, or something like that, right? So this idea of blue ocean is a new uncontested space. What is the red ocean? Red ocean is what used to happen, and it comes from the military, right? Where ships will actually come to shore to basically try to invade new ground, and they will meet opposing forces. There will usually be a carnage, people throwing arrows and maybe javelins, or people, with swords, and I don't know, whatever they used to do when the Greeks were fighting the Peloponnesian Wars, for example, right? And what will happen with the water is, from all these people getting stabbed and hurt with weapons, there will be blood everywhere, and it will become a red ocean, right? So the idea of a red ocean is a place where everybody's trying to compete or fight for position, versus a blue ocean where you're the only one in the space. And by the way, this insight, I don't think it's emphasized enough. In fact, I think monopolies kind of have a bad rep. But at the end of the day, what you want to do is build a monopoly. If you want to read from somebody discussing this topic, I will strongly encourage you to look at the work from Peter Thiel, who is one of the two founders of PayPal. The other one is Elon Musk, which maybe you've heard about. but maybe you've never heard about Peter Thiel. If you haven't, you should Google him. He has some very good videos about this topic and about creating your own monopolies, right? So the example that is discussed in the article is Cirque du Soleil, right? Which essentially revolutionized the live theater business and also the circus business, right? So it was kind of an in-between that changed dramatically how things were done. And in a way, positioned themselves in a blue ocean by being hard to compare to traditional circuses or traditional theater. Because what they did is they picked the components of both sides that they were most appealing to them strategically, and then they created a new offering that was based on that. You can read through this in the article. I'm not gonna repeat the same material, okay? So how did it work for them? Creating this new offering that was very different from the traditional offerings. So it was not like an old circus. There were no animals in there. There were no multiple shows happening simultaneously, right? They didn't have stars, so it was easier to basically duplicate and have multiple shows in multiple cities simultaneously, right? And well, it worked really well for them, right? They created a new offering that was hard to compare to existing offerings, and it was geared more towards a different customer segment, right? It was more towards adults instead of kids like the circus, right? And more towards corporate events, right? Where you can just invite some of your clients, for example, to a show because it was a lot more reasonable for that age, etc., right? Well, it worked really well, right? And they've been growing steadily for over 10 years. And they have created a whole new space for themselves, and now they have some new competition. So how did they do that? They basically changed offerings that everybody knew, and they made them more appealing from a strategic perspective, right? I think I already mentioned some of these things, right? So first, they remove star performers. These are expensive, right? And not only that they are expensive, but they also create trouble. For example, if you want to have multiple shows running in different cities, you cannot do that if you have a star because you only have one, right? And they also remove animals, which had all sort of complications associated with them, both because some people don't agree with the idea of having cage animals, like PETA or PETA, I don't know how you pronounce that society, but also because there is sickness associated with it and risk, right? Tigers and lions are not exactly easy to handle, and there are accidents that happen, etc. Okay. What else? They reduce the amount of thrill and danger, right? Which is good because it limits dramatically the number of accidents associated with it, right? And what did they create? They create a much more premium experience by having themes, a more refined environment, right? It enabled them to have multiple productions in different cities, which obviously if you're trying to expand as a business is great, right? And yeah, so they created a very different experience, and they actually did so by, in many ways, reducing the difficulties in their logistics and also the cost of production, which is great because then they were able to leverage the best of both worlds, right? Now, if you think about innovation, innovation happens in many product categories. In fact, if you look at the last 100 years, you will see that a lot of products that we have today, they didn't exist before, right? And I think this is all obvious, right? Cars, not only cars, electric cars didn't exist 15 years ago, right? And there was no music recording, there were no planes, right? Wright brothers, right? No petrochemicals, there was no plastic, right? No pharmaceuticals, there were no drugs, no penicillin, right? No antibiotics. So, the last 30 years, cell phones, right? Let alone smartphones, right? Biotech, right? Home videos, which now it's like, I don't even know what a video is. Everything's streamed now, right? So all these products have changed our lives, literally, right? So all these innovations create a lot of value, and if you actually can come up with a new space where you'll be the only firm operating, it's a very risky endeavor. It might not work. You'll fail many times, but the time you succeed, it really pays dividends. Okay, so how are these strategies different? Blue ocean versus red ocean. I think I've already emphasized strategically, but let me just repeat, right? Red ocean, meaning you're competing against existing competitors in existing spaces. What you're doing is you're competing basically for market share. Okay, you're trying to beat the competition. How you do that? Dropping prices or offering more value for the same price, which means that you have thinner margins, right? You're going to have to basically fight for existing demand. That's why the key metric usually is market share, right? And at the end of the day, what that means is that you're probably not going to have large profits. On the other hand, in a blue ocean, right, when you create your own market space, there are no competitors, at least not initially, right? Because you're making the competition irrelevant. It enables you to create new value, and because of that, new demand. So you don't need to be fighting for market share. Now what you're doing is you're just trying to educate people into what you offer so they could actually jump in because the value is there. They just might not know about it. Okay. And what this enables you to do is essentially increase your profits dramatically. Okay. So this is why you should try to create a blue ocean, why you should be a monopolist if you can, although it will be hard to sustain in the long term unless there are laws that prevent other people from coming in. But as a firm, you're always having to think about innovating, because if you don't, you will be in a red ocean and your profits will suffer. That's it. That's all I have for you guys today.